I recently was speaking to somebody who was trying to build a fusion plane, and then another person who was doing asteroid mining. The first question is, who's your customer? And I know that's not the first question that engineers and scientists want to hear. They probably want to hear, like, tell me more about your idea, tell me how cool it is. But we have to figure out what stage of the project is at. Is it at the idea level, or is it actually a business? We tend to value ideas higher than they're supposed to be. But in the business world, you actually have to find some traction with the customers. And you try to have informal interviews with those customers, which share their emotions and pains around. And now once you start having maybe 50, 100 interviews like that, you'll have better understanding what you need to say, what kind of questions to ask, how to introduce yourself, and to explain.
Welcome to Entrepreneur in Action. Today's guest is Vladimir Baranov, founder of humaninterfaces.co, providing business coaching for tech founders. Vladimir, welcome. I'm excited to learn more about you and your business.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for having me, Michael.
So tell me about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out as an electrical engineer and a computer scientist, spent some time in fintech, joined Aerospace, but it was a bit of a journey through the markets, through my own aspirations, but also a way of discovering what I think is important in this world. And at the end, I realized that I wanted to make as much impact as possible, and I was looking for a role which would suit that sort of aspiration. And I find that engineers and scientists of the world make great things happen, and sometimes they require just a little bit more guidance to convert that inspiration into an actual business. And this is where I wanted to be, at the crux of where an idea, an engineering idea, or a science research becomes something that actually makes a real impact on the world and becomes a company. And I feel that if I am jumping in at that point, that I could multiply the impact that they're making and hopefully be helpful to them.
Awesome. How did you get drawn to that? And then what are some of the outcomes that you're seeing with your work?
Yeah. So I think I was drawn to that due to the usually complexity of a lot of projects that come from academia or from engineering brains. I recently was speaking to somebody who was trying to build a fusion plane. And then the next day I was speaking to somebody who was building a computer, like a baby cam for petri dishes, so you can do experiments. And somebody was trying to automate some lab protocols, and then another person who was doing asteroid mining. Now, I think it's pretty cool to do like a breadth of those projects. Now, the sad part is that I don't have enough time to do a lot of deep dives into all of them, but being exposed to those projects, I feel is really cool. The outcomes, the questions that you're asking me, I think it's more connects to the changes in the perspectives that the scientists and engineers are experiencing once they actually start interacting with real customers and interacting with the ways that business world works.
So yeah, how do you move those things forward? So you have to know enough domain expertise, right? For all the various things, right? It's knowing the right amount, right? You don't have to know everything, but you have to know the right amount about the asteroid mining, about the baby cam for petri dishes, about, a fusion plane. You have to know the right amount to help them move forward. How do you get that research into your brain?
Yeah, well, my brain is very small. I learned very fast when I started doing entrepreneurship, and it's kind of David Rock wrote a really great book about your brain at work. So it gives you a lot of techniques like how to manage the sort of volume of information in your head and what to drop, what to isolate, and how to be more effective. But your question is very interesting because I realized that once you know at least one vertical and you know it kind of well, a lot of learnings from that vertical approaches, structures, interactions, you can roughly map to any other vertical. Now, is everything this exactly the same? Absolutely not. Will you know every little detail? But we're humans and we like to organize things in categories and buckets. And I say that your first 10 hours gets you 50% of understanding of a specific industry or a specific subject. Your next 1 million hours, so how many hours that is, will get you the rest of the 50%, and the last 10% will probably take you the most hours to learn, just because you start getting into such minute details, very important details, but you're no longer as impactful at the levels of categories. So I'd say it does take a little bit of learning, but at high level, that is what required for you to learn if you're trying to help somebody with the business case. And then when we have a conversation with an engineer or a scientist, we help them formulate it in a way that I can understand it, even though I have some engineering background, but also there are customers who might not have any engineering background. So it's like part of my learning is actually having them explain to me how things work in a way that I can understand it.
So is that then the key? Like if you're dropping into a brand new industry, what exactly questions will you ask the founder in order to help them?
Yes. The first question is who's your customer? And I know that's not the first question that engineers and scientists want to hear. They probably want to hear, like, tell me more about your idea, tell me how cool it is. And it's also important to discuss, but we have to figure out where the project is, what stage of the project is at. Is it at the idea level? Is it at our project level, or is it actually a business? We tend to value ideas higher than they're supposed to be, just because something we came up in our heads and we think we're smart. And I'm sure you're smart if you came up with a great idea. But in the business world, just a publication about how smart the idea is not enough. You actually have to find some traction with the customers. So that's why I asked the first question, is like, who is your customer? And from there, we started already exploring how does your business map to that customer, and how can we generate revenue and find a good fit for your product.
What if they don't have their first customer? How do you get them over that hump?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we will have to agree with them that, hey, we probably don't have a business yet. Like, since if you just have a product, they have a project, you have an art project. So yeah, you have something you build, which is beautiful. I'm sure it's complex and it's intricate, but it's not a business. It's not a product that is on the market. Um, you start with exploring. So like the question is like, how do you find the first customer, right? You start exploring what are the needs that your product is addressing, or let's say if it's an idea ready to for pivoting, what pain points can it address for the people in the market. You do have to select some sort of rough understanding of who your project is helping. Like if you're doing a petri dish, probably you're not helping lawyers. If you're doing a rocket engine, probably you're not helping doctors. So we already have a narrow understanding of who's your audience is and who your market is. Once you have identified rough understanding of who those people are, you reach out and talk to them through the methodology, which is called customer discovery. It's been popularized for the past 20 years as part of a lean startup methodology. And you try to have informal interviews with those customers, which share their emotions and pains around their pain point around which you're building your product. But kind of coming back to your question, where do you find them? A couple of things. One, meetups, conferences, and LinkedIn. And the more you can talk to over various different platforms, the more you will understand where people are more receptive or not receptive to actually your message or their desire to talk to you. And once you start having maybe 50, 100 interviews like that, you'll have better understanding what you need to say, what kind of questions to ask, how to introduce yourself, and to explain your value proposition.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, as you say, you're working with people who start with an idea and they really believe in their idea so much so that they're putting their time, they're putting their effort into building it, making it happen in that sort of build it and they will come mentality. And so it sounds to me like your work is taking them from build it and they will come to let's now meet your customers where they're at, or your
Yes.
potential customers, and let's find out how does reality meet your dream which you've brought into the world. You've made it physical, but it's still not a product yet until it connects with a customer and solves a problem.
Yep. Absolutely. And I also want to actually to highlight, and that's sometimes causes me myself a little bit of frustration. But build it and they will come sometimes works. If you have a very busy intersection, I don't think it really matters what business you build there. Some people will stop by your business and will buy something. Now, what would be the most optimal place to have that business? Maybe not. It will, your selection of the business, will it matter? Sure, but you're very likely to have a non-zero revenue by having your business at a very busy intersection. I think it's also true for the build it and then come if you're dealing with commodity. If you're bringing water, food, or anything else to the place of people's gathering, and somebody might have forgotten, maybe somebody thinks that it's expensive somewhere else. You're providing a commodity, a need that is usually is important in the places of gathering, will be sold. Um, However, with case of engineers and scientists, generally many of them are not offering a commodity. They're offering usually new gadgets. They might not be familiar with the market. So when the market looks at them, it's like, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to eat it. I don't know how to plug it in because we have not created that interface to their pains through either marketing message or through the conversation in order for them to accept this new idea easily.
So help me by helping me understand like one of the journeys that you've been on before that you felt was a struggle where you had to overcome something. You worked with the customer and you overcame some kind of challenge.
Yes. So good questions. So I can tell you on my own example, within the growth of our aerospace business, is that I was coming from a commercial industry, and for those who are not familiar, aerospace is, as I have discovered, a very much a government-driven operation. So about 90% of the money comes from the government for a lot of aerospace projects, for building rockets, for building satellites, and so on. And a lot of new companies that arise in that space industry um, have to work with the government to get that money. So it's not really a very competitive. It is a competitive environment, but it's not in the same way that open market generates all these different clients for yourself. Really, like there's only one client, which is divided by maybe civil, military, and a couple other branches that are available for you to submit your proposals. So it becomes a very different game. So the struggle was that we were trying to do this customer discovery interviews with all the different stakeholders who we thought could be our clients. And until we have realized that all of those clients are themselves on the government payroll through proxies, actually would not be successfully buying our stuff unless we get validation from the government that they love us. So in a sense, once we were able to win some contracts from the government, then we started getting more traction from these peripheral companies because of it's a complete change in mindset that you had to do. That there's not a lot of clients, there's not a lot of money available from the peer-to-peer kind of transactions, but everything comes from the same source, and that's where you have to go initially in order to get kind of proof of your product and business.
So you found out in this really roundabout way. It wasn't clear, right, when you started,
Yes,
that the customers were there was a blocker in front of
yes.
getting those customers, which was you had to have that you had to have the gate opened by the government, uh, who was sort of the customer looked up to them and said, okay, if they okay them, then I can okay them. Is that
Absolutely.
is that common in these fields like of engineering and science where people are creating something new, or is that just limited to aerospace? Or?
So I think it's more common in aerospace because of how market does not actually exist for a lot of space products. Like if you take away a global internet, if you take away a TV or communications or GPS, there is really no market in space. Like the only producer, the only consumer of space products, well, not the only, the major consumer of space products is the government. Now, if we take something else, let's say heavy machinery or nuclear energy, or again, wind energy, battery storage, is government one of the clients? Absolutely, but they're not occupying as an important niche as they are in aerospace. Let's say somebody starting a backup battery storage company, right? For let's say when the sun goes down and they want to use the battery to store the solar or wind energy. Now, You don't have to sell just to the government. Now, does the government need that as part of the national grid system? Absolutely. But all the private companies who are in isolated outposts could also be sold to because they're terrestrial companies. So when it comes to the engineering ideas that perhaps are maybe a little bit too out there, as long as they're terrestrial, government will be the client. They're not the only client. And what we're also seeing right now with even like nuclear energy, like Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, they're tapping into those sources, which before has been domain just of the government.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that all those people were nuclear. However, I did go to a conference, I think it was from Stripe, and Sam Altman was there, and he was talking about new businesses or the businesses that he's working on. And the way he classified them were intelligence on demand, which was Chat
Yeah.
GPT, and energy on demand, where he wants to work on fusion.
Yes.
Is that the type of nuclear energy that Amazon and Facebook might be working on, or is it or is there are they competing in
No,
that same
that's
arena
slightly
or
different.
something else?
That's slightly different, and I have to highlight that I'm not the expert on fusion fission, so like I would not be able to give you a direct engineering access. But what I think he was referring to, I think he has H space or something like that. He does have a company which he supports that is specific to nuclear energy generation. But because you're bringing in Sam Altman, ChatGPT or any other LLMs require a lot of energy to do inference and training. Another point he might have been bringing up is how important it is to bring alternative energy sources. So they're not the training is not using this um, current energy grid and using these alternative sources like nuclear trucks, portable trucks that could be stored next to data centers where you can run all the inference and training.
Yeah, I think his topic, the way he presented that was he was like, these are the limiting factors in our society. Like we don't have like we used to not be able to access intelligence at a moment's notice. And then he feels like we just don't have enough energy available to
Yes.
do anything that anyone would want to do at all times. So I that was my sense of that it wasn't necessarily actually even related to the LLMs
Mhm.
specifically, but just to have as if and he felt like if you could have those two things solved, intelligence and energy, then we could be unlimited as a species. Was my take on it.
Yeah, I mean that's a very big message. To some degree, we are limited by energy. One is we're limited by energy that we generate from fossil fuels. There is some limit to the solar energy, but we just don't have enough capacity to solve for our own needs. And also, none of that, except for nuclear energy, is super portable. If let's say we leave this planet and go somewhere else to continue relying on it, and the further we move away from the sun, the less energy it can support us as we travel. But yeah, it's definitely a growth limitation.
So, so just bring it back to like the beginning. We're talking about like how you have to know the right amount of information that first 50% in that first 10 hours of study. What do you find is your best way to get that information in that first 10 hours? Like for practical purposes, like what do you do?
Of course, I think these days I'm sure everybody reads the Wikipedia first. Like, and as soon as you find a topic, you go to Wikipedia and you read that first page, so you can have just rough understanding of what it is. Number two, conferences. Find out what are the biggest conferences are on the topic or around the topic, and see what people are presenting on. And then for each of those topics, ask ChatGPT or find a Wikipedia page which will bring you up to date. Um, Find the top companies in the industry. So that's going to be 10, 15 companies, and sign up to their LinkedIn posts. So they will be updating on what the hottest thing or what's the latest thing happening in the field. And usually the words that are acceptable to their customers, and not in very super science and engineering way that you have to translate it yourself. Um, Four, try or maybe three, find if there were any autobiographies or biographies written by the people who were in the industry or on the field. They're also sometimes use much simpler language to explain what is happening. And the last one is like Twitter and podcasts. If you want to kind of catch on the more latest stuff that is not very fundamental to the industry, in order to have kind of the lingo or vernacular they can use to speak with your founders.
I think it's fascinating how a big part of uh, what I'm hearing is that you're looking for ways to communicate this, right? Because it's the people who are generating this, right? They've done the deep dive. They've learned the 100% through the million hours, and they might have their own language, which might not resonate as easily with customers. It might be difficult to understand, as I'm hearing from you. And so you're finding a big part of this is about communication. You're helping people communicate. They might be in this silo where they've like, I've invented this amazing thing and it's going to help the world. Okay, well, it's not going to help the world until you help them get the communication to their potential customer.
So exactly. What I realize and what I conclude is that in the end, the sale happens not on a platform, not on a text message, and sometimes it does. It happens between two brains of different people, and each brain will have its own vernacular, its own lingo, its own understanding of the world, a model of the world. And for you as a product or a person, like a business person who's trying to access that and plug into this, you try to understand how that interface gets created between what's inside somebody else's head and the product you're offering. And this is kind of the language that you might have kind of hearing it already. The language that I'm using is very much engineering science language. Like, how do you build an interface from one person to another, from product to person? What kind of APIs, what kind of variables do you need to configure as part of your marketing message in order for that to execute well and to be understood? Now, and the reason I'm using this language is because this language is more familiar to scientists and engineers, and it lends with them as an analogy of how, let's say, person who are more used to sales and marketing are able to communicate.
So I'm your new customer, Vladimir, and I have some amazing scientific improvement that I need to get out to the world.
Yes.
And the first thing I'm hearing we might do is learn what the language is. But tell me, what are the nuts and bolts? How do I go from I've built something in my garage and now we've discovered a language? How are we going to get that message out?
Okay, so if you come to this is for a session, I usually receive a 60 to 100-page slide deck, maybe written paper or what the thing is about, maybe a patent. And my challenge is like, now tell me what you are presenting to me with the idea, let's say in 5 sentences. At this point, we already experience struggle because if the person has not tried to summarize everything they've done in 5 sentences, it becomes really hard. And we try to figure out how we can regroup the information that they're presenting into that little block. Once we are successful with that, and it takes a little bit of time, I'm then ask, okay, now do that in 5 words. So that push towards extreme shortness of the pitch helps us to create the top level hierarchy of the idea features makes it much easier to communicate. Because then we can go backward instead of like going from all this noise and all this disorganized information and kind of shoving it towards the customers. We can go now from the top and increased level of complexity of the details of those features and those artifacts of marketing artifacts. How are we going to present them to the customer? Because if, let's say, making wine from water is what my thing is, then it's easy, right? Then that's the top level. Great, amazing, everybody gets it. Now, what's the bottom? What's the next level? Could be, well, I only work with very clean water. It produces only this kind of wine, and I only want to sell it to lawyers. So then we start already figuring out how we want to craft that message and how we're going to support that, and what kind of questions can we ask from lawyers whether they are interested in this kind of product.
Oh, okay. So you're learning the questions to ask the potential customer
Yes.
to see if that is a fit. And
Yes.
so in learning those questions that you need to ask the customer, like what helps guide you that to know which questions to ask to get to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
right questions.
So really good question. um, what I like to think about it is that you need to ask a question in a way that does not bias the person responding to you with your own answer that you're already kind of hoping for. So anytime you ask, like, do you really love my product? And the answer is probably going to be yes, because people are nice to each other and they're going to say, this is a great idea. Maybe some asshole will say, like, no, it's not, stop talking to you. But most of the time, people you're going to be talking to, they're going to like, oh my God, that's interesting, really interesting. Thanks for talking to me. Now, great rapport, bad information. What we are trying to do is try to ask those open-ended questions which generate narrative from your prospective client, where you can listen to particular elements that might indicate that your hypothesis is being validated. So you're not looking for validation of your hypothesis. Will lawyers like wine from water? You're looking to ask them a question like, tell me about your favorite drinks, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. What are your interests about different kinds of sources that it might be coming from? What's a particular aspect of that is more interesting to you? Now, those are made up questions that I did right now, but they're indicate the direction of kind of questions you want to ask people, where they start sharing their narratives and perhaps highlighting their emotional connection, or their intuitive connection to some specific elements. A customer might reply like, I really like the history of the beverage that I'm drinking. I would like to understand what it is made from, who made it, how it was made, like what the earth it came from, what kind of dirt it came from, what kind of fruits, what kind of flavors did it have before it became the thing. I want the story, right? So we're hearing that, okay? So now we're writing down like how that approach might work with this customer, right? I like to have a specific shape of the bottle. I like to have a specific shape of the glass. I also really hate when I leave my wine open for like X number of hours, it kind of evaporates. Now, there's a couple pieces that are interesting there. One is we want to, if this is like kind of our average customer, not necessarily all of them have might have the same answer, but many of them reference the history. We want to add a label with the history of the thing we're building on our bottle. Also, there was an emotional aspect where a person hates when the wine evaporates. Maybe we might want to think about a wine that auto closes, and thus addressing that need. Right. So we're not going from perspective like, hey, I have this product that closes the bottle automatically. Um, I'm interpreting it through the narrative of my client. Now, there's also a twist here. Like we get all this narrative, and it's all great, and people stay there. They have this need. We don't. We also now need to clarify whether all of those needs are actually something that they're willing to pay for us to generate the business here. And what you can come back with, it's like, oh, that's fascinating. Like, let's say if somebody solved the way of closing the bottle automatically, what do you think you would pay for that? Like, is that something that would be really cool? The answer might come back like, oh, no, that's something like I would probably like to, but no, I don't really need it. It's like me wanting like a Lamborghini. Is that a pain point? Maybe, but like, will I spend the money necessary to actually acquire it? No, no. So it's like you need to qualify that the pain is actually something that people are willing to pay for. And if the question does come back, oh my God, if you solve this problem, this would be great. And you're like, okay, so would you like to prepay for this problem solution? And if I don't solve it, I'll give you the money back. But so this kind of gives me an indication whether the person is really serious about working with me. Now I know I took this a little bit far, like through different stages, but hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I love that answer, because none of this works out if the client can't pay money, because that's the society we live in. You need money so that you can pursue, the things that we're really interested in. If we want to solve this problem and it doesn't connect with the customer, we can't keep doing it unless we eventually get money. Love that. So, what's the engagement timeline? So I'm a new client and I want to work with you. Like, how long does it happen? Do I meet with you every week? Do you become a full time member of my team? How does that work?
Yeah, no, it really depends on engagement, and sometimes people see the light or a different way of operating after just 2 3 meetings, and some of them grasp really fast the knowledge I'm having, and some of them deal with so many crises day to day in their work environment or their entrepreneur environment that just there is no time to internalize all this learning, or new things come up. They come to me, and then the engagements could be 6 months to a year. I think my longest client is about 18 months now, and generally, we meet about every 2 weeks, and occasionally when there's a crisis situation, once a week. There needs to be time in between to solidify the understanding of what we've talked about, and also to try to resolve the situations that you're in with information you gain from our conversations, and also insights and clarity that you gain through our conversations. And that usually takes time and maybe a weekend in between to think things through.
And so it is coaching. So you help them to gain this new perspective and new understanding, but you're not like on the ground like helping them make the sales calls.
No, and while I can do that, it will be the worst call that I can make because I'll be missing most of the context. Remember about learning? I've been in that mindset for maybe 10 hours. They've been in that for a million hours. So, in a sense, for me to hear what the client is saying and relate it to the value the product can provide, I'll be the least helpful person in that situation. I can give analogies, I can give suggestions, we can together study a sales script. I can help with that, but I cannot actually own the decision to make the sale or have the sale call because again, it's coming really out of context. What I try to do is I try to help with generating models of decision making or noticing and being aware and listening to when you're interacting with the client during a sales call or during their customer discovery. Because in the end, building business is a lot about listening and giving people what they want.
And how do you help them with that? So somebody's coming from a completely alien perspective to the sales side of things, right? They're the inventor, they're the technician. They love to build things, but they're not. Their forte is not marketing and sales. How do you help them go from that to having the right amount of knowledge about sales and how to develop their marketing and their sales script?
Yep. Yeah. So it depends on the individual. If the individual desires to start doing sales and they want to be in charge of the organization, that's a great start, and that's where I usually can help. Most of the time, technologists, scientists, engineers might come to me and say, like, I actually don't want to do any sales. Like, I don't want to, like, I just want to be the chief science person. Like, what should I do about this sales process, right? How can I get it out? And this is where we might have a conversation about maybe it's a good idea to find a co-founder, that person who's going to be getting out in the field and actually conducting those customer discovery interviews. But that's kind of the fit maybe that is not there for sales. The fit that is there and the person that has the desire, the only way to practice sales and be better at sales is by doing it. An analogy that I like to give, it's let's say you're learning how to surf. There's multiple components there. There is you, there's a surfboard, and there is an ocean. You will always have to listen to yourself and be aware of how your body reacts to those two elements. The board has to react to you and to the ocean, and the ocean is the ocean. The analogy here is that ocean is the market. The board is the kind of the sale that you're doing, your sales strategy, your sales pitch, your sales conversation, and you will always be you. You will be learning, you have to be learning all those things at the same time. It's really hard to learn surfing while you're on the beach. Like there's without the water, you will not gonna pick, your body is not gonna pick up those intuitions. And so, what I generally recommend is like get yourself out there and start talking to people. After hundreds or thousands of hours you pitching yourself, you will start noticing things about other people's reactions, the market's reaction, your sales pitch, how does that impact, and also different trends that are happening in the market that you need to navigate and learn where to put your feet on the board or where to like change the sales script a little bit to make it more dynamic. This is a new learning for a lot of engineers and scientists because they like to look in the world a little bit more structured way, a little bit more predictable, that there is like 10 points that you need to go through. Unfortunately, it's not the same way in sales. It's very dynamic, it's very flexible, but we're all learn to walk. We're all learn to, most of us learn how to ride a bike. And most of us learn how to maintain balance while we're riding a subway. It's really no different, and our bodies are already prepared for it. All we have to do is just commit hours.
And if they're the babies, right? So they're new, they're brand new at sales. What's the baby steps, right? So if you're learning to surf, before you get out into the water, right? You you learn like where to plant your feet, buddy. You're on the sand. As you said, there's not a lot that you can learn until you get into the water. But what is that minimal amount that they can learn before they get into the water.
Yeah, of course. And while that might be an extreme analogy, I said that you cannot learn anything before you get in the water. Having a pitch, a 30-second pitch, a 3-minute pitch, a 10-minute pitch about what you want to pitch to the person you're going to talk to, and memorizing it, that's first step. Number two, um, in addition to memorization, actual practicing it in front of either a coach or in the mirror or yourself as many times as possible. So that way you can listen to yourself, you can videotape yourself or record yourself on a microphone to hear what you're saying. If it's not the pitch, it's practicing and asking those questions. Because I think like with the pitch, you're kind of already committing yourself to some sort of like an idea and you're directly pushing your product. With the customer discovery questions, you are a little bit in a place of safety where asking a question is not the same thing as telling. And usually the honest is on the person replying to you with information. And that's much easier to be done. Practice customer discovery questions first, and then practice pitches. And from there, you can go on to try like actually sell to larger number of people.
And where do you get your clients? Do you go and do like presentations at conferences, or do people find you mostly on multimedia? Like how I'm sorry, through social media? Like how are you attracting the people who can help you can help them the most?
Yeah, no, great question. There is multiple channels, so it's some of them you mentioned. So definitely the conferences, presenting at the conferences or attending the conferences is the best place to meet people because one, many of them have paid to be there, so they are committed to some sort of conversations. They're committed to some sort of learning, some sort of change. They're committed to meeting you. I've rarely met a person at the conference who doesn't want to connect because most of the time they're there for that themselves. So it kind of isolates and creates a sort of very selected group of people who want to talk to each other. Um, Referrals. And also, I work with a lot of incubators. So I mentor and I coach at incubators directly, which creates a good lead pipeline. Also, commercialization pipelines out of academia, like when the PhD students work on their research and they're ready to commercialize it. This is also the time when I try to interact with them. Website and content on LinkedIn brings a little bit more too, but mostly it's in person interactions for me.
So what we talked about it a little bit, like what keeps you at this, like what helps you know this is the thing that I want to do every day?
That's a great question. Over the years of my career, I've gravitated towards the places which make the most impact on the human existence. And I believe that the place where we ourselves can make the most impact is a overlap of most of our skills and also the opportunity that is in front of us. Um, I've thought about different scenarios of where I can be the most useful. Can I be a full-time executive? Can I be an employee somewhere? And absolutely, I can. But as of right now, my model of kind of impact is that the the conversations that I offer, the coaching that I offer, is a one-time relationship, or which is like a year or maybe 6 months long, through which we are making small changes that are super impactful to your journey. And if I make those changes, and if I help those changes to be created in as many individuals as I can in places where I think have the most opportunity, and I believe that engineers and scientists do change the world for the better in most cases, then my impact gets multiplied. And so when I wake up in the morning and I'm trying to help and coach those individuals to become better business people with their offerings, that's what makes me tick. That's what makes me feel better. That's what makes me feels. That's what allows me to go to sleep without regrets.
Yeah, so you're really helping people who they I understand this from firsthand experience when I've built things as well, right? Like we get so tunnel vision about what we're doing, and we get in this part of ourselves where we're just building, and we really can forget how to and how valuable it is to. But once we wake up from our building binge, right, and we're ready to meet someone like you, Vladimir, to help us, right? We know that, hey, what I was doing before the building is not the same thing that's going to get me to connect with my potential clients and customers. So
Right.
I need to have a big shift. And so what I'm seeing is that you're like communication on demand. You're helping them learn, like, you've spent your million hours. Now we got to peel that away and we have to make it digestible for someone else as a snack.
Yes.
Somebody else can't just eat an onion with a million layers as a snack. We have to make now a snack sized version of that that you can share with the world and coat it with some candy because an onion doesn't taste good, right? This has to be a
Yes.
candy coated snack that somebody's going to enjoy, uh, as a window to understanding. And then now some of them, they might go for they might want to know all 1 million layers, but they're not going to be, nobody can learn that immediately. The snack is the gateway to learning what they need to know to be the right customer.
Yes.
So I think this is a wonderful service that you're providing, Vladimir.
Thank you. And I also wanted to throw in another kind of analogy, and I sort of help them build that human interface. It's between their brains and other humans. It's between their product and other humans, and they need to start thinking about it's not just like a word. It's not just a brochure. It's a complex model of interaction that they have to build out between them and the market in order for the traction to start happening.
And so, how long does that take? What should they expect? Like from the first time they meet you, from the first time they woke up from their building binge, and they're like, "I need to connect," and they find you. How long is this going to take?
Yeah, so I think it takes between the initial stages between 3 to 6 months to get the kind of model understood of how to interact. It will take probably a year or two before they actually find that real good traction with the customers and start getting those first revenues. Because a lot of that learning, as I mentioned, happens through interaction with customers, and the more we can squeeze in a time period, the more you can actually grow. And it takes time. Like even if you load everything into your subconsciousness, those kind of ideas do not start connect until you go for a walk after a few months of experiencing that on your own. And then let's say in 6 months, how many potential clients can you actually talk to? 100, 200, 500 maybe, but that's kind of like pushing a little bit too far. But it's also like, so it's interactions with me, it's interaction with the market where you actually learn how to do things. It's creating the pitches, it's practicing the pitches. So there's a lot of work that needs to be put in. But timeline wise, you can definitely see first results after 3 months to 6 months.
And what would be the first results?
So the first results would be validation of the hypothesis that you have around your product. So you'll have clients telling you like, yes, we absolutely want it. Here's a letter of intent, or here's a non-binding LOI, a letter of intent. Sorry, I just said that a refundable deposit, or here's a like, you know what? Here's a contract for 2 years. Those are kind of the indications. I kind of stage it into like other ways too. So first is people offer their emails for a sign up for a letter message when your product is ready to go. Then when you send them out the first email, they reply to you and you have a conversation. Another stage is when they reply back to you, actually schedule a conversation and you have a call and maybe several calls. And as you go through that funnel, people will get more and more involved with your product. And the more of these interactions you have, the more measurements you can have. Hey, something is happening. People are interested. You're interested in improving this product, and they're interested in eventually perhaps in buying it too. And all the funnel leads eventually to hopefully a multi-year contract and maybe a month-to-month subscription, whatever your model is.
So this is fascinating, learning about your business. And so in Entrepreneur in Action, we talk about the 4 F's. So it's finance, fitness, family, and fun. So let's move into the fitness part a little bit. And tell me, Vladimir, like, sitting at a desk takes its toll on us as entrepreneurs. Like, what do you do in order to keep your energy and like stay fit?
Good question. So I have a standing desk that I work with, and I try to start getting up at least half an hour to an hour, whatever the time is. I try to schedule calls without video. So this way you can pick them up on the phone and walk, pace on the balcony or pace outside, wherever you want to go to. Just make sure you have a really good Bluetooth set that filters out all the wind noise. What else would do fits wise? So I have a daughter, right, and it's really hard to kind of sometimes find time. But our local YMCA, and I think a lot of YMCA's in the country, offer daycare while you're working out. So I'm really tapping into that opportunity in the evenings. So it gives me about 4 hours of workout per week. So I'll be able to do that. I think that kind of probably limits that. You kind of still have to watch out your diet, but exercise wise, that's what I focus on. Oh, most importantly, and I don't know if it's for everybody, but I know that for a few people who are a little bit taller, I'm 6'3", neck is very important to keep back to avoid headaches and any sort of tension in the back of your head. So this is like a regular adjustment that I do, like, I don't know, every 10, 15 minutes as I notice myself kind of bleeding towards the camera.
Oh, so you lean back and that helps you avoid headaches?
So it's leaning back in here. I'll show you in profile. Like this is my head profile sometimes when I'll be on a computer and I'll fix it this way because naturally just our eyes and our brain gravitates towards the place where the image is. But at some point through Alexander's technique or Gaghill method, I've learned that there is a way to balance your body as if you're doll dangling from your head. And then you can relax your neck in a way that you're balancing on your butt bone as opposed to like really tensing your back and helping out stretch out those muscles. So this way it avoids headaches.
So Alex, can you just quickly, like, what is the Alexander technique? Is that the one where you feel like you're a doll that's like if your head is a balloon, you're
Yeah, yeah, sure. So Alexander techniques, and I don't think I'll be academically correct. I'll just tell you from my experiential things that I've learned about it is that we start learning about how our body actually balances in order to explore different places that there is tension, so you can stretch it. Like one example, which would really kind of blew me away, and I know it's really simple, but if you raise your hand and you keep it like this, and you will notice that your body naturally wants to counterweight it, so like your weight is in the middle, and then you lower it. And I'm not moving my body; it's just like after I lower my body, like this is not me doing it; it's kind of the body doing itself, like counterbalancing it back to the place where it finds balance. And through some of those exercises and exercise technique, you find where your true line of balance is. So this way, as you regularly move around, you can kind of retract yourself back to the place where there's a center of balance. There's no woo woo. This is just muscle work, and it's originally started for like actors and dancers, so they can be much more in control of their bodies. I'm nowhere close to be much in control, but it gave me greater awareness of how to feel my body.
and the reason that balance is important is because
The reason balance is important is it creates the balance position creates the least resistance on your muscles and your body, so that in the less tension, so the muscles do not get as tired because your positioning is not abnatural, not natural to what your body wants.
so you're acting more in accordance with your body if you can pay attention to your balance. I noticed
Correct.
that I did notice, as you said, with this sort of this action, this balancing movement that we did there, I did notice less tension after letting my body find its own balance there.
Yeah. And it does it on its own, so it's like sometimes a little freaky. It's like, whoa, am I in control, or the body's in control?
Yeah, and if we're looking for a source for the root cause of headaches, tension could be that.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, tension headaches connected to phone or laptops has been the number one source of headaches until I figured out and explored it. And now every time, and you can find this YouTube videos. Anytime I use my phone, I put my hand under my armpit, and this is how I hold my phone. So this way, it's always in front of your head and not like this, where you're hurt in the back of your head.
Does that work for walking?
I mean, it depends how dexterous you are. Like, I, 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 I do that while walking. So, yeah, yeah.
And then, okay, so you mentioned you have a daughter. Like, how has that affected your sleep? When I had my son, I when he was a baby, especially up to like age 3, he cried all night, and
Hmm.
I held him all night. and it really affected my sleep in a very unexpected way, which now is completely to be expected. But at
Yeah.
the time, I didn't know. Has that affected your sleep?
Um, so I'm definitely not a parent expert. I only have a sample of one. Our daughter was not as troublesome. Like she does wake up occasionally at night, but she has her own room. She had her room since she was maybe 3 months old. So in a sense, like there was a sense of isolation from her parents. Although we're next door, she's still like in her own room. I don't think she cried past maybe a year and a half, like a lot at night. And I really don't fuzzy about the memories, like because nature blocks out all those pains, so you get to have another one. Um, but no, I'd say it's pretty. It's pretty like we have. We also have a noise machine which helps out, and I think another thing maybe would help is light blocking blankets, not blankets, drapes. So like something that doesn't let complete blackout drapes.
And so blackout drapes, that's just something you can find online or on.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just like no light getting through. Yeah, it's like when there's first light at 4:30 in the morning. Sometimes during the summer, it doesn't get through. Like wakes up at whatever time the alarm is set or whatever time the noise machine stops working. Yeah. So some regularity there that was pretty good. And we read to her every night, and she goes to bed. But I'd say very rare that she gets up. And again, every kid is different. We probably got lucky, and our next kid is going to be very problematic. And I'll be calling you, asking like how you solved your own problems. But listen, I read to her. She asked me to sit with her for like a minute or two, and she's out. Like I'm so jealous. Like last night some events were happening. I was not out in 2 minutes, but
Yeah, that's an awesome time for latency. If she had her own Aura ring, then it could show like she has like a perfect sleep score every night, and it's all from feeling comfort. Right? She
yeah,
knows you're right next door. She
yeah.
hears your voice when you're reading
Yeah.
to bed at night. I wonder if this is also what we need as adults.
It could be that. It could be boys. Boys sometimes I hear are more troublesome as kids than girls. So I don't know. But I would like for somebody to read me at night. I would like for somebody to stay there and tell me like everything is going to be okay.
It's really nice. Yeah. You know what I've been using is the Calm app.
Okay.
um, and I do find like nighttime content that they create, and
Mhm.
that sometimes I need that, and
Yeah.
it does help me go to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. I've leveraged Headspace for similar reasons. Um, and also, there was this book I think called "Why We Sleep." Was a pretty good learn about what needs to happen, like routine wise, to kind of make the sleep better. Which is like no screens next to the bed, like wait for 20 minutes after you turn on the screen before I go to bed. Do not use any screens throughout the day of bed, so you do have dissociation of work or any kind of like stimulation when you're in bed. So like you kind of program your brain that once you're in bed, you go to sleep.
Yep, that's the way to do it. Program your brain like it's the computer that it is. Uh,
I don't know. Like, is it technically a computer or a neural network? And is neural network a computer? So it's like, how do you define that? Because let's say if you look at ChatGPT, the way it does math, it just like hallucinates something, and it's right sometimes. But I feel like sometimes that's how I do math too. It's like I put the numbers in, and sometimes magically they just come out.
I've noticed that as well. I've noticed that both with ChatGPT and my own brain. One thing that's pretty fun to do with your kid as she starts to show interest in puzzles and games and math is to play those math games.
Yeah,
And it's something I actually did regularly with my son, and it didn't hurt him. He's still studying math in college. So, but I would ask him. I actually noticed with him that there were some issues with like his understanding of like which tens position, which is the hundreds position, which is the thousands, which is the hundreds. So some of those positioning, and so I would ask him in words as opposed to what he's getting at school, like it's
yeah.
all written down or it's all on a thing. So I'd ask him math questions in words. This might be something fun for you to do with your daughter if you're not doing it already.
I am not doing that yet, but again, I think we're touching upon how different human interfaces work. and how learning is different for, and how do you have to express it differently in order for it to get memorized. A model needs to be adjusted for you to understand content, or kind of like to start progressing on the subject.
And we've already broached the subject of family, uh, the third F in the bucket. So you have a daughter. What are your family goals? Like, what are you doing towards your family goals?
That's a big question. Well, I guess grow family. I don't think anybody asked me that question before, but I think tranquility, peace, trying to optimize the amount of time that I can spend with them. Figuring out activities to do during the weekend, I think, is probably the biggest problem for a lot of families out there. So I went a little bit about creative about that, kind of pre-planning and getting her into different activities, be that pool, be that learning a different language, be that doing gymnastics. And now we got into hockey now, so that takes away about 3 hours per weekend. It's like, how many hours of activities do you need to fill in per weekend? So she could be occupied. I guess that's the goal. How do you occupy your children with activities so this way you can be doing your own things? There's a goal to spend personal time with my spouse. So like we try to organize dates at least once a month. Sometimes frequently more. We try to leave our kids and go somewhere else for a couple of days if possible, because that sort of disconnect allows us to create this sort of understanding of that our relationship is also important. Um, and I guess home improvement is part of the family things, but I guess that project never ends.
Yeah, home improvement. That's a never ending hobby as well.
Yeah.
So what do you? So what looks like a good date for you guys? So you do a staycation, you find a hotel, and you're just like, we're gonna get away, or do you
Yeah.
like get take get rid of the kids and you occupy the home?
Yeah.
Like, what's your ideal? Like, do you want to go? Do you want to travel near, far? Like, what's your ideal?
I think I've learned from traveling in my younger years is that I would like to go somewhere where there's not a lot of overhead of the travel itself to enjoy the experience. So if I need to go to Europe and I need to spend 10 hours in the airplane and then 10 hours back, it needs to be a much longer period of time. So this right now we have limited our journeys to, can we drive somewhere for 2 3 hours and spend there a couple of days and come back. So this way the travel itself does not add the unnecessary stress and overhead to our experience. Um, and where are we going? We probably are focusing on either cultural experiences or food. And that's our general preference because those things we can do together. And not as much as like physical activity. I feel like our priorities are more about exploring architecture, going for walks, um, and, um, and those kind of things.
Some people love to go somewhere and they want to go hiking. They want to conquer a mountain together. And then for you, it's cultural and food experiences. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think my wife is more of a leader from that perspective. Although I think I've learned her ways and I can guess what are the good foods are out there. I think she's more foodie than myself. So we try to pre-plan each of our meals before we go, so to understand what kind of places are available, what kind of cuisine is available, and make our reservations before we even leave. Um, Although sometimes I am a little bit adventurous and would like to explore maybe the market or the breakfast places without making reservations, so we can be a little bit more spontaneous, as I mentioned. Um, as far as activities, yeah, those are definitely I try to plan in advance, mostly because they need reservations. Like if you're going for a historical walk or if you're going for a food tour, usually they only have so many people that can do that, or they might even cancel if you don't reserve. Um, yeah, probably like that.
So this is interesting because I have always been someone who never wants to take a guided tour. Like if we go to a museum, I don't want the headset. If I go to a new country, I want nothing. I just want a book that I will never look at. I want the I want the Lonely Planet guide. I'll look at it once to say where's the bathroom. That's all I want, and then I want to just explore almost at random. So what's different about you that makes you want to do these like guided tours?
I think I appreciate the narrative. Now, it's not necessarily that I will accept the view of the world that the guided tour is providing me, but I will 100% miss all the details from the tour if I just walk around and look at things. I absolutely love general exploration, and there will be a lot of days in my travels where I'll just go for a walk. But I do find guided tours, and we're not maybe necessarily talking about museum because museums are like more kind of like focused experience. I'm not talking about more like guided tours on the streets because a lot of buildings look kind of similar. So like if you go to Europe, I'm not saying they're exactly the same, but there are a lot of similarities. So if you walk around, at some point you'll start noticing patterns. We would not know the stories because a lot of those stories are not available in the building's facades or even through the monuments. And even if they're there might be like a name or two, but it would be really hard for you to understand what kind of actor, what kind of poet, what kind of like general lived here, what kind of things happened. Because in the end, buildings are buildings, and what we really connect with is people's stories and people narratives, because then we can connect to ourselves, and then we can try to understand how what it is really truly like to live here. Or to experience life here, and I think that's what I yearn for is for like somebody else's experience in this particular place, so I can sort of live their life as they were living it too.
Tell me one that that felt really impactful, like one such tour where you were like, this was an amazing tour, and there's something that I took away from it.
um, this is something my wife tells me not to talk about too much, but I absolutely love Speed Lavage. Speed Lavage, he is a guy who is an amazing tour guide in New York City. He had at some point even a Hulu show for like six episodes where he assigns so much poetry and emotion to inanimate objects that you just kind of walk around following him, pointing at things and tell you stories that you would never even make it up in your head. Like you'll point, look at that lonely cannon. Now, doesn't don't you feel like very sad for it because like it's so far away from all these other cannons? And think during the battle, it probably felt like not protected at all, but it's all brothers and sister cannons like sitting over there. Now, that's a example I made up in my head right now, but he does it in such colorful ways that you just like come out like, what was that experience? Like, this is not like in 1936, like this cannon was installed and things were fired, and then no, this is like something we connect at some sort of fundamental, even at like childish level, where that's truly how we look at things sometimes, right? You know, like when objects are isolated, we assign some sort of meaning to it. If objects lay together, same thing. So I think like he's a phenomenal tour guide. And there's I think a video for him, not a video, like VHS or like DVD from like 1996, and he tells the story that he was in New York City double decker, and he refused to wear the gray coat or the red coat, and he wore green instead because that way he got more attention from the clients, and they fired him for that. So he's a unique kind of character. Um, yeah, he asked at some point like he wanted like, how about we do Shakespeare deliveries for Shakespeare? You know, like the way you do pizza delivery, you do Shakespeare delivery. Like you dial it in, Shakespeare troupe comes over, performs, and leaves. I'm like, that's probably not going to be effective from business perspective. But then it's like, stop thinking about it this way. Just think about what this experience is going to be. Forget the money. Sometimes ideas are great as art, and you touch talking about it, and you kind of indulge in them for a long period of time, and then maybe after, if you want to do business, you do business. But sometimes you just gotta let go of like a rigid view of the world.
Yeah, that reminds me like going to like Warner Brothers or Universal Studios where you they have the tour guides and they take you around to see all the different sets and they talk about the movies that were made there and the actors and maybe some experience and they get you engaged emotionally, right? So on an idea level, on an emotional level, and you're there as well, and it really can make these memories that feel like there's been a lot of value created, and it's a wonderful vacation experience, as you said, to get away from the seriousness of life, but to find some levity and something that's unique and fun. And now you have a new story.
Yep, yep.
So besides Speed Levitch, Any other tours?
It's hard to top. It's hard to top Speed. Like he's so good. He's so good that again, my wife tells me that should stop talking about him when I talk to other tour guides and asking them, do they know him and can they talk in the same way? And I know that's maybe disrespectful, but it just feels like I want the same emotional experience. Like, do you have it? Can I order it? And they'll look at me a little funny. But I'd say that was, I'm thinking about all the different cities I went on a tour with, but like it's just so hard to like think of something else.
So now you can make a partnership with Speed Levitch and offer speed as a service. So you could have him on demand at any
Yeah,
city you go to.
yeah, yeah.
That's a great business idea, right? For fun. Okay, and speaking of fun, so what is it that you do for fun?
You asking a parent what they do for fun? I don't know if there's a lot of answers to that question. Um, I am able to squeeze in a few hours of listening while I'm at the gym, like to a book, an audible book. Um, so that's maybe 3 4 hours of like different books that I when I get recommended, I get to listen to them. And recently, listened to two. One is the by Fei Lee about like her journey through AI and how she created ImageNet. So I didn't know that part of the story, so that was really great to hear, and her immigration story. And the next book was about being mortal. I think it's Atul Gawande, and so he is one of the surgeons. I think he wrote the first book, Checklist Manifesto, about how hospitals could benefit by just having a checklist for regular operations, so you don't rely too much on your memory to perform procedures. And in this book, he was talking about how like Madison um, really focuses now on trying to keep people alive as long as possible, which is not necessarily always that something that people want. But as physicians and as surgeons, we don't have like I'm not a physician, but as they don't have a model of how to make those decisions in like last week's last month of the person in order to be satisfying the wishes of the person who's passing out. So that was like really good to books, and I like books of that nature because they challenge my mental thinking about how I think about the world. Um, but I'd say I would call that fun. Also, like just getting together with people. We now have a bunch of families that we now also have kids, and getting like 10, 15 screaming children running around is kind of fun, and connecting with our parents too. Going to conferences, really love going to engineering conferences and entrepreneur conferences because you always walk away with a new idea, or you walk away with some new concept that you have never considered before. Um, and get to network. Like network is fun for me because you learn other people's stories and you can integrate them as part of your life.
What's your script to meet somebody new at a conference?
Well, they kind of stuck at their booth, so you can approach and say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" but in the end, let's say if I'm I try to help as much as I can when I talk. So I either provide information that I know about the subject, or ask them a question if they have considered thinking about certain ways in different way, or like what options they have available. And for many people who, let's say, who have not experienced coaching before, they might have been the first time when they've been posed that question. And in a sense, they had those thoughts in their head, and this is the first time they kind of talk it out. And I feel like during those moments, for me, it's important to listen and see if I can actually take them a little bit further, whether you can reach conclusions that are very helpful.
How do you take them further in that?
So through coaching, it's a lot of listening. So like when you ask those questions and say, "Hey, we're struggling with that," and when like to some point, the kind of conversation leads to this struggle question, like, "Hey, we're probably not sure how to do this. We're not sure how to do that." And my next question is, so what are your options, right? And they say, "Oh, this, and this," and like say, "Well, how do you compare them to each other?" And they say, "Oh, I'm not sure yet. Maybe price, maybe value, maybe is some time option, maybe the relationship. What other things come to mind?" And then all of a sudden, they have a framework for how to make this decision, which perhaps have bothered them because a lot of thinking about that was in their head, and there was not another partner who they could ask that question from. Now, they're not necessarily probably willing to share that right away, but they're interested in sharing and figuring out how to solve that. And when you nudge sort of like different places using questions, you allow the mind to kind of open up and provide their own solutions. Because in the most cases, like as a coach, I don't have full context of what the best solution could be.
Getting those 10 hours is what it takes, right? And
Yeah,
you're and
yeah,
if you're at a conference,
yes.
you're not going to get 10 hours just
You
from
have 10
that
seconds. Yeah, you
initial
have 10
conversation.
seconds.
10 seconds, 10 minutes, what is it? So I'm at a conference and I meet somebody new and I say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And then if they're at a booth, they're going to tell me something related to their booth. What are they going to tell me if they're not at a booth? And I say those words.
No, sure. And just to like, if we're talking about specific questions to ask, I would probably point out, oh, that's really cool things you guys doing. What brings you here to the conference? Or like, what do you guys do? Um, and as part of that, and I'll answer your question in a second. I would also try to say like, what are you looking to get out of your conference? Because this way, we'll be hearing what they're needing, and as I'm walking around and talking to other people there, I'm going to be able to connect them together to chat about the things that they need to chat. For and just give me 1 second, please. It gets a little stuffy here. If you're walking. They're on different gates, right? We all have different ways of walking, and you know the people who are just kind of hanging around, maybe not on their phones, maybe not thinking, they're just walking around saying, "Hey, you have a few minutes? You want to chat? Tell me about what you do." Because again, in the end, at the conference, people are there to meet other people. So if you approach somebody who's on the sidewalk and you ask the same question, you're not going to get the same response because most of the time, people on sidewalks, they have their own business, and when you're approached by a stranger who's not exactly qualified, perhaps you're not going to get an answer. But at a conference, it's such a controlled environment where people are there to connect. So any stranger is actually not a stranger. It's a qualified connection. And I'm not talking about from business perspective, but in the sense like this person is there to meet other people, and why not that be you? So you can approach, hey, you have a few minutes, want to chat about each other? What brings you here? Same question. I'm like, hey, what are you looking to get out of the conference? And they might go through their interests. You will go through your interests. Oh, and then you might have a conversation somewhere. Maybe there are some topics that they bring up that are interesting to them, and then you continue conversation, or you just walk away thinking about what they need to find. And as you meet more people at the conference, you might be able to bring back and connect with them. At the end, you grab their connection, and if there is like a deeper topic to discuss, you can suggest that, hey, why don't we jump on a call later or grab a lunch? But generally, you don't generate like hour or two conversations at the conference because you try to maximize your connections. So it's like 10-15 minute conversation. Another good methodology is during lunches or breakfasts. Typically, conferences set up like round tables or big tables at which you can just approach and join, and then you can have a conversation with multiple people at the same time. Now, it's important that when you come in, you either decide that you're going to be moderating the whole table, and I know that nobody asked you to moderate it, but naturally you can just jump in and say, "Hey, what do you guys were talking about?" and ask them what's going on, or you can just focus on one person who's next to you and try to talk with them on the similar topics.
Yeah, I it's always like a leap of courage, right? To be the first one who speaks.
Yeah.
Um, because I've noticed that it seemingly uh, it has to be me. What how's that for you? How do you build a mindset where that's okay?
I think for most of the time, I believe that I'm doing the other person a favor of saying something stupid, so that I feel stupid and not them, and that I'm soliciting the attention from them and conversation from them. So this way, it makes it easier for them to reject me. I also try to introduce ways that they can tell me like I don't have time because I introduce them. Hey, do you have a few minutes? You want to just chat about each other? And if they don't want to like me or I look scary, they can say, I don't have time. Or most of the time, people just say, like, hey, I don't have time or I'm busy. I'm heading to somewhere else. Got to catch up with somebody else. And they walk away. But yeah, generally, it's hard for most people to approach because of that inhibition of like, what will other people think? And if you've done this a lot of time, it kind of like disappears because we also have very short context memory. And if I'm going to ask you or another person I'm talking to who we're trying to work through this limitation, it's like, tell me the last person you met at the conference, or last 5 people you met at the conference. Most of the time, you're going to draw blank. You're going to have to go to your LinkedIn and figure out who you met. So like we even forget bad interactions most of the time, unless it's like terribly bad, which rare, almost non-existent.
I mean, as you said, right? Everybody's pre-qualified. You're all there together because of some shared interest.
Yeah.
Like you went through the door that says this is for people who have this interest. So now you bought into the fact that while you're there, you're the one who has that interest. And so, and I love how you say you have a couple minutes to chat about each other. That way it gives a limitation. So they know you're not going to try to talk to them for hours without getting a new agreement.
Yes. Yes, and sometimes that agreement is maybe you will end up talking for a couple of hours, but at least it gives them an idea of what your intention is. And again, it's at a conference. Everybody's there to talk. So if you're not there to talk to other people, you should probably not be at a conference because then you making people like me and you uncomfortable approaching you and say like, "Hey, I don't want to talk." I mean, yes, there are people who don't want to talk, but it's always a surprise.
And some conferences actually, I've been a vendor at a conference and I've set up booths, and I noticed that at certain conferences they have a matchmaking system before the conference where you can get connected to people who might be able to you might be able to help each other with your businesses, and you set up those you schedule those conversations even before you go to the conference.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. I still find that there is a lot of like stranger danger or performance there, and there's also like a lot of last minute decision making. I was at a VC startup conference a few days, like a few months ago, and then I scheduled eight. Four people showed up, so half of them didn't show up, and then five other people reached out to me. I want to meet with you, and I said, okay, yeah, schedule. None of them showed up. So in a sense, like good idea, but I think it also we need to make sure that the players who are participating as part of that are also maybe honest or like we know what the behavior is, or there's a sort of like moderator or somebody who's holding people accountable to having those commitments. Because I personally did not enjoy that. It's a great idea, but I think if they want to organize it, I think it makes sense to set up tables of matchmaking in the sense that you either get connected by interest and then physically you go to the table, and then you have multiple people who have committed to that table. Then you can, then you can perhaps talk to other people who showed up or and forget the ones who didn't. And things happen also, especially when people get covered for their conference by their work. Sometimes they just don't go because they don't have to. Like there's no that obligation. Entrepreneurs or individual people, executives who are like running their conferences, go to the conferences. They know they're paying for everything with their own money.
Yeah, it's a very different investment proposition when you're out of pocket going there versus the company.
Yeah,
And I wonder if companies might not start to realize that at some point. Like, if you really, if we want to get investment, let's have maybe some sort of copay where you know it's not just a free trip to the Bahamas. Like you got to pay $100 or something like that. Just somehow you're invested just the same way you buy a stock and you're invested in a company. You have you participate in your own.
yeah.
So it's not just a vacation.
But I think there are different incentives for different companies. Some companies just probably just require presence or even just buying a ticket. So they're in the mind of the conference organizer and they get intel that they're supposed to be getting from that person. And that's what they may be focusing on. Some conferences, maybe that's just for the employee to be informed about what the things are happening. If they're not informed, then they're not benefiting themselves. But again, really depends on like kind of the goals and achievements you're trying to go through that channel.
Yeah, I actually don't like the idea that I just had a minute ago. But yeah, I do think that people should be invested in going for some reason, like they
Yeah.
should get data out of it or something. Like what's the point of going if you're not gonna?
For sure.
Okay, so you read books for fun. You you get together with other parents
Yeah.
among screaming children. You go to conferences. What else are you doing for fun?
So if I had unlimited time, I'd probably go into hackathons or CTFs. Like this is like if you're familiar with cybersecurity space, it's like capture the flag competitions where you get access to multiple servers and trying to break into them. And if you have a team, then you're working on something together. And I just find it very mind a great mind exercise, um, great entertainment to participate in this. But they are a time suck. Um,
I've never heard of this. CTS?
CTF, capture the flag,
Oh,
in cyber,
CTF, capture the flag.
yeah, in cybersecurity paradigm where you have like red team, blue team, maybe the target server that you. This is from like engineering perspective, and you're trying to break into that server, or you're trying to do some forensic engineering on like a data dump. Um, that's something that is very interesting. If I really have again a lot of time, like designing robotics mechanisms and putting them together, that's kind of been something interesting for me. But right now, it's just like all of those activities require all of your context, memory, attention span. And if you have a child, like at any moment you load up everything into that context, anytime child interrupts you, like all of that falls apart. So like there's no point to even uh, attempting that in any way.
Now, it depends on how old your child is because they do actually have, like robotics systems that you could buy for your, and they're meant for kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Once they get to be like 12 or 11 or, like middle school,
Yes.
late middle school, you could work together with them
Yeah.
on various robotics projects. Like I think it's called Lego Mindstorm.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, my child is still a little young. She's 4, so like we're still ways away from that. No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that time when we can start building projects together. Until now, it's like a little bit of survival on my side.
So tell me, I want to know more of the things that you're looking forward to with your child. So I know you love robotics. You want to develop an interest in robotics with her. Tell me some of the things that you're looking forward to doing together with your kid.
I think my responsibility, and I know that's not exactly how you ask the question, my responsibility as a parent, I think, to expose her to many different ways of kind of going through this life, be it robotics, be it hockey, be it figure skating, be it gymnastics, be it singing, be it learning a foreign language. As long as I expose her to all these different things, she at least knows they exist. And if some point later in life she decides like, hey, I actually like that thing, she at least had that experience and she would be able to pursue that in more detail later on. Um, I think the activities that I like doing with her is like reading her books or kind of playing in the imaginary games that she's imagining right now. They're still being developed. I mean, she's still a young child, but those things are interesting. Going to this, we have this science center, which is basically kind of like a museum of science that she likes running around and supporting her in her endeavors and discoveries. I'd say those are my favorite activities.
Yeah. Going to the science center can be a blast when they're at the right age to discover all the physics and the marvels of biology. I think at the science center near me, they also have an IMAX, which shows like science oriented IMAX films.
I see, I see. Yeah, we live in a small town, so we don't have IMAX, but yeah, absolutely. We went to one up in Rochester here, and yeah, it was great. I think we truly enjoyed that.
The aquarium.
Yes, yes. Not a lot of here in Northeast, but when she was really, really young, we went to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and also to the LA Aquarium. We went to the one in Brooklyn, but it's not as big as one on the West Coast.
And I would think it would be a big adventure just doing like urban exploration, like what you can with her, like going going for a ride on the subway. I mean, I'm assuming
Yeah,
these things are safe. Like taking her out and about, just to see the world through the child's eyes, in
yeah,
relation to them as
yeah.
their parent, is fascinating.
Absolutely. Loves riding buses, trains. She doesn't do bicycles very well yet, but going a car trip, looking outside the window, uh, those are really great activities that we definitely involve in.
These are the things that people don't talk about necessarily about having a kid, but you really do get that. It's like a refresh of like the world we live in,
Yeah,
because hearing their words, the way they explain things,
yeah,
helps you understand like, hey, maybe this sort of solid state that I've been living in, like that serious place, maybe it's not that way at all times.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think about it all the time. As and now like I think the thinking got a little bit more complex with the LLMs introducing us to a new models of our own brains. I cannot help myself but to compare the machine experience and my personal experience of how we're learning the world. And I'm seeing my child learn the world around me, and I see like a lot of patterns that she's making, which are very similar to how the machines are making them too. Now, not saying she's a machine, but there are a lot of patterns.
So, like what? Tell me, what are you seeing?
So how we first figure out what shapes are, what colors are, and how it's important for us during our training to label the things that we're showing. So in a ways that there is a training set that's going through her mind when we're reading books together, that she can recognize those objects once she lives the context of book reading into the world, and she knows what those objects are. Or like how to talk about them in what context and the relationships between different characters in the books. She can try to extract those and relate them to the real world too.
I had a guest recently, who's, AI expert, and he's talking about, some of the limitations that I've found with LLMs, were just sort of a lack of overall creativity. It can do really well with the information it's trained on, which seems to be, all of Reddit, right? So it's really good at constructing things within that set of
Yeah.
predetermined known information. And if you compare that to like an image based AI, where they're able to come up with all kinds of creative things because, like make, let's have an image of a penguin that looks like a cube, like whatever it is. Because, and what he mentioned, the difference to him was that the image based AIs are trained on the world of images, which is much more creative, right? Because all the paintings and all the graphic design and all the artwork and all the films that we might train this on, they already have, built-in metaphors and similes within the images already. So the data set is already creative.
Yeah.
Whereas the data set of LLMs trained on language, trained on the internet, which is, Twitter and Reddit and all whatever data it was trained on, not as creative. How do you think about that?
Well, I would like to understand what this creative text would mean to that person, because if you train on poems or fiction or nonfiction, they have elements of art in how they structure the paragraph. I mean, when humans structure those paragraphs in that text, and when LLM parses it, you can ask it to create a joke now. You can ask it to create a poem. You can ask it to describe like a photon electron interaction in haiku form. Now, like how many humans can actually do that? So in a way, like is that creativity? Like how much randomness do we need to incorporate into our generation creative process in order for it to be considered creativity? I also want to kind of like say about the LLMs that were trained on video formats is that while I understand that they're like maybe more sophisticated from their outputs than what we feel the text is outputting, they're still not as good when it comes to like specific domains. And let's say in the domains of robotics, and we see a lot of robots now these days folding clothes and maybe washing the dishes, a very, very specialized data set needs to be created for those unique tasks in order for them to actually perform well on them. If you take any of those general models for generative AI in text or images, they would not be able to decipher very well the elements and artifacts of the objects that need to be picked up, washed, or folded. Like you have to dive in and create special data sets.
Yeah. It's it is interesting to think of the LLM trained on novels and poetry,
Hmm.
which maybe I'm just not maybe I just haven't seen that as a product yet. The
Oh,
same way that I see Claude and ChatGPT and
but have you not tried prompting it to like respond back with a poem or some sort of creating novel, or like ask LLM to create a book for you?
I have, and it's very basic
Mm.
in my experience. Maybe I'm not using the right prompt, but I do find that very exciting, and I do want to know what the right prompt would be or the right LLM would be to get that kind of creative novel output.
So I'm not an expert on the prompts, but I feel like if you ask it like, "Hey, can you please tell me whatever the prompt is, but format it as a Shakespearean poem or somebody else's style of writing, or make a haiku out of it." I think when you start indicating to LLM the format or the structure of the output that you want to have, then I feel like it performs much better from a creativity standpoint. Now, all of the creativity is obviously predetermined from the context that I've learned from, but I haven't made a solid conclusions myself. Is like, are we ourselves limited in creativity on the learnings that we had? Like, can I be as creative, let's say, in different cultures, which I don't have a lot of, let's say, background on, as I am in my culture? Like, is that experience a lot important? Like that sort of understanding of context, I feel like it's also important when we talk about creativity or art or expression. And if we don't have the context, I feel like we ourselves fail to be creative as humans.
I think what I notice is I think what I'm seeing is a lack of willingness on the part of the LLM to come to a new understanding. And based on that, I can't see how it can be as creative. And I don't see a lack of willingness on the part of the image generation models. Uh, those are limited in terms of maybe like, oh, we don't want to make pornography or something like that, but there's not a lack of willingness to try a new idea, like make me a light bulb that's again just a light bulb that's shaped like grapes.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no lack of willingness for it to just go and run with that new idea and make you infinite versions of light bulbs shaped like grapes. But
Yes.
if I speak to a language model and I say, um, as a as proof, this is proven. We're using base 10 numbers in a way that is suboptimal in the English language. Help me identify a way to make this information known. How can we change this proven thing to get better results as they do in the 20% of planet Earth where they use base 10 number words in a way that is more accessible to children and therefore gives them an edge in math? How can we? And it will reject the idea. It goes, nope, it's not better. And I'm like, let me walk you through the thinking. And then if I walk it through the thinking,
Yeah.
it will eventually,
Yeah.
only after putting up so much resistance,
Yes.
go, yeah, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. All right, now help me. And it goes,
Yeah.
nope, there's no way to help you. There's no way to do this. It's
No.
literally like a petulant assistant who doesn't want to be dragged towards a better idea.
That's fair, but I also wonder like what kind of training set they have inside there, which relates to your topic. If there are none that exist, then you will be obviously more convinced of the knowledge that they have from their experience than what new information you offer. And I think new information is hard to be absorbed by most people, especially if they have the model in their heads of the exact opposite experience or different experience.
Yeah. So what I'm looking for is when is this going to happen that the AI can be smarter?
Hmm.
Can it? When can it be more creative? What's going to be the tipping point?
Yeah.
especially in the language model. I don't see the problem as much in the video model. Like I said, it'll make you a light bulb shaped like grapes, sure, but this resistance and and you know inability, obviously, to like. So what I'd love is an LLM where I can say, give me a better idea. Here's an idea. Give me
Yeah,
something that's better than what humans
yeah,
already know.
yeah.
And we're not there yet. I'm interested to see how and when that can happen.
I'm wondering if you can ask it to be less stubborn, if that would enable you to speak in the context that you want to speak with the machine, and maybe it reverts itself to some default ways of operation that it infers from the text that it reads.
Yeah, I'll be fascinated to see what happens over the next few years. I'm wondering if this will be possible,
Mm,
based on the fact that we train it based on humans. Will an LLM actually be able to exceed human intelligence?
Um, we are still coming up with a test, figuring out where like what are we considering human, because Turing test was like one of the first ones that we had tried to figure out if that is possible to fool somebody on the other side, if they're interacting with a human. I think we're way beyond Turing test now. Um, and we just don't have the bar. And I would also argue that a lot of things that LLM is able to put together and say, um, it goes beyond some people's levels, and especially in some context. Now, can you spot where it's LLM or not? Maybe sometimes, um, but only if you're crafted prompt engineer, prompt operator are you able to like highlight different things in a text where you can like call the LLM out and say, oh, I know that's wrong because like the model didn't train well. But I'd say for most of the people, they probably would not even know the difference.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so, and it is. It really is great if you're trying to get up to the level of like the top level of what we can do already as humans, which is a wonderful ability to be able to get to that. But to go
Yeah.
beyond where most people are at, that would be a new horizon,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I would love to see that. That'd be really cool. Okay, so Vladimir, if you were my business coach, what would you tell me to grow my podcast?
First, I think we'll need to learn about your outcome desires. Like, why are you doing this podcast? Like, what for? Like, are you trying to reach an audience with a specific message? Are you trying to practice interviewing skills? Are you growing your own personal brand? And once we kind of figure that out, then I'm going to ask, okay, so you're doing that. So who's your audience? Like, where do you find your audience? Is your audience, what is your audience like? What kind of questions are you coming up during a podcast which might be resonating with your audience? Then we can go next level. Like, are you monetizing it? Are you interested in building your business beyond where it's actually at? Like, is it a lifestyle thing? Is it like something that you're scaling beyond whatever visible limits of podcast?
I mean, I can tell you some of these just real quickly. I found that after a time where I was lacking in all of those four areas, um, I was able to turn it around. Like finance, fitness, family, and fun, they weren't going well all
Yeah,
at once.
yeah,
And then I was able to turn it around through a combination of luck and trying really hard and working and effort. And then once it turned around, my life was awesome, and it made me realize, hey, this is this is valuable for me. Maybe it's valuable for other like entrepreneurs
yeah,
to see that, look, this is not just about money, this
yeah,
life that we live,
yeah,
and to think beyond that. So I think it's a bit of like spreading the message of you can have not only success financially, but you can have success in these other ways,
yeah,
and this kind of balance will bring
yeah.
maybe a greater feeling of happiness and success.
Of course, of course. I have this phrase I use, like, we're not in the business of making money, we're in the business of making memories. So once you make enough memories, you're gonna want to spread them around. Um,
Yeah, I'll cut that. And then where can people find you?
Oh, that's a great question. So I am on LinkedIn. I'm also on the website. And for this podcast, I actually generated a special offer. If you go to humaninterfaces.co/trends, Trenz, like Michael Trenz, you'll get a free discovery session, a complimentary discovery session about issues you might be running into growing your business from engineering and scientific perspective, or if you already founded a business and you're running into some founder issues, relationship issues, growing business issues. Happy to chat about those.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. This has been awesome getting to know you and hearing all about your business and your life experiences. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
No, of course, Michael. Thank you so much. Glad to be here. And those were fantastic questions. I did not expect to go so deep and come out on the other side, like, very refreshed. Like we just had some sort of emotional purge. Happy to be here.